Well, hello there. Hi. I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you just to my Instagram followers, my recent Instagram followers. I noticed that you've been following the account for the English Coach podcast, and for that, I am very thankful. I also want to take this opportunity to wish you all the best for 2022. There is much more to come, much more like the last episode. The episode 61, which was part of the poetry series and also an experimental format that has the traditional audio section as well as a video exclusive that is published only on the show notes page for this episode. If you are interested in that content, you can always head on over to www.englishcoachpodcast.com and look for the show notes page for episode 61. Now, as I've said before, the show is not just for people who are hoping to improve or keep their language skills, but also for others who are just interested. However, the reason why I did episode 61, in keeping with the poetry series, is a prime example of how you can, through DIY, through getting involved in art, how you can improve your language skills. I kid you not. I was going through a bit of poetry with a good friend of mine. We were reading some poems, and there was one poem in particular from a collection from a poet, German poet called Hermann Hesse. There were a few poems that I read, and what happens as, non-native speaker, user of German, I understood the written word. Yes, there were no problems there. I understood even the fancy vocabulary that was used and even some of the metaphor that was used in the poem. However, the full meaning of the piece, the full meaning of the poem, I did not grasp until a native speaker actually read it. Why is that significant? It is significant because through the intonation, the flow, the rhythm of how it was read by the native speaker, I got so much more in terms of understanding of, what was meant by the artist, the poet. It was a strong reminder, it was a poignant reminder of how important it is not only to, be a little more human in the way you approach understanding languages, but also how important body language is, intonation, and all these other little nuances that you will get, yes, in unexpected ways when you get involved in the language outside of the formal framework. It was a performance. The poetry reading was a performance, and through her reading, her manner, her way of reading, I got, I would say 30% more understanding of what the poet meant. So I wanted to share that as well, right? And also to be quite clear on the fact that, it's not just, this poetry thing is not just some kind of, thing that I do because I have nothing better to do. It is actually a very valuable lesson for any one of you who's trying to improve your language, that you should also, get somehow in contact with the arts. Yes, in contact with free time activities, maybe form groups, in informal spaces. Do other things. You will not get everything you need from books and from abstract vocabulary lists, as I like to say, and from grammar puzzles. That is not the best way, or let's say it is not the only way to learn a language. The name of the podcast is English Coach Podcast, Living the Language. So this is, that was a German poem. However, the same applies to German. It applies to any language you're learning. Living the language means that you try to get living experience with the language. It means you try to come into contact through other ways and give life to your learning experience. And that was such a strong reminder that I chose to finally do my own contribution to my own poetry series and offer this as a reminder to you that these informal channels are not to be ignored and not to be underestimated. Another thing that I also mentioned was the fact that my German that you hear or that you will hear in episode 60, another episode, or that you might have heard, was not acquired through formal channels. The German that I have, it's still not the best, but for me, it's fine. I always say if people want to understand, they will, and that's perfectly okay. It's enough for now. I never really learned it through formal channels. It didn't work for me at the time. The arrangement that was there, of course, thankful that it was there, but it just didn't work for me. How I learned my German was through talking to people, interacting with people. Most of you are learning a language to talk to people, so you should talk to people. That's what it's about. And that is why I always say on this episode, I take my usual relaxed, accessible human approach to your learning experience. That means if you're learning a language to talk to people, then you should talk to people. And that's the best. That is the best practice you can get, and is the best thing for you. That is why I chose to use poetry. I use other art forms as well. As some of you might know, I'm also a dance photographer. I do that sometimes, not so much these days, but I still do. And I do get involved in other art forms. And I say all of that to say this, give yourself permission to try out also things that you like. If you're setting a goal, make it easy. You can attach it to another. Let's say you're forming learning habits. Attach these learning habits to habits you already have. And an easy way to do this is to do things or attach your language learning to things you already like. So if you already like poetry, if you already like the arts, if you already like dance or photography or whatever it is, attach that to your learning experience and you will be better. Yes, you will be much better. And what it is you're doing, another slogan I used to use on the show is, then learning doesn't have to feel like work. All right? So that is why I did this poem. All right? It's also wonderful history lesson. As I said, there's a surprise to it. There's much more to this very romantic poem, and you will be surprised as to the caliber that informed this piece. Of course, I'm learning as well what works, what doesn't work from you. So I'm always open also to your feedback. So if you have anything that you want to say, anything you like, anything you don't like, anything that was particularly memorable, or anything you just think I should know, just tell me. You can message me here via Instagram if you want, although it's not really where the show lives. You can do it here as well, or you can use the feedback forms on the main website. You can also send in voice feedback by using the link that is there. You'll see it also on the website at www.englishcoachpodcast.com. I'd be happy to hear from you. All right, now you might be asking yourself, okay, this is the English Coach Podcast. Why is he doing poetry? The thing is this, the objective, the purpose of the show, the original purpose of the show is the same. Although the format is evolving, every now and then I experiment with something new. The show is not generally sponsored by anyone. I call it authentic because I pretty much do what I want to do. I do it for you and I do it for me, and there's no one in between. The purpose of the show hasn't changed. The reason why I started it is because I wanted to offer my students, present and past course participants, a way to hold on to their language skills by staying in contact with the language. So this is not a format for lessons. I'm not giving lessons here. right? There's somewhere else for that. Most of you might know by now that I'm an English trainer, coach, sparring partner, whatever you want to call it. I can be all of these things. But the podcast is not about giving lessons. I train people, coach people somewhere else. And, if you're interested in that, you can also ask. But that's not what the show is about. The show is about helping people to stay in contact with the language via interesting conversations with real people, yes, on real themes, and about, things like the arts, free time activities, DIY activities, very important, and, doing that in a fun and interesting way. The English Coach podcast means that it's a podcast presented by an English coach. It is not one in which or on which you get coaching in a formal way for English, okay? So just in case anybody was wondering, I just want to set that straight. All right, now this Instagram thing, I'm doing this specially for Instagram. As I said, just for the people who have been nice enough to follow the show here. I notice the following has been improving, getting more and more. It's still quite moderate. I think it's 70 something. I don't think I've gotten to 80 yet, but it's still a very new account. So of course you can share it. I appreciate the follows, but I'm doing this especially for you. Although the show itself it doesn't live here. Yeah, I pretty much use Instagram and, even YouTube and, I like to say Facebook and co, just for the convenience of people who like to use it. It is not really something that I like. Yes, as a creator, I don't really like giving my content to these platforms. There is a tendency somehow, I think, for them to take ownership of my stuff. And there's a feeling as if they get to decide what my content is worth. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I'm thankful for what they do offer. But at the end of the day, a little sense of perspective here. They are advertising companies and they want my media. Yes, and, not just mine. I mean, my media is interesting for some, not for everyone. But, it is worth something, and I really don't see why I should give all my media to them. Yes, for those of you who follow on Instagram, it's a nice way to, get an idea of what is or what has been published as a little reminder of what is there. Then you can just head on over to where it is meant to be listened to, ad free and so on. And I will continue to do that every now and then, but just bear in mind that this is not where the show lives. Yes, I do not work for Instagram or for YouTube or anything like that. I work for myself and for my audience.